Well, again, hello and welcome everyone. We are excited to have you joining us tonight for a discussion about public affairs and social impact consulting. I am Cheryl Rosenberg and I'll be moderating our discussion tonight. I'm an advisor in the Career Center, and if we haven't met yet, I look forward to it in the future. And I am joined by my colleague and career advisor in the Career Center, Karen Dankers, who some of you might know as well. And we've got a lot to cover today, but before we begin, I just want to give a quick note to everyone joining us today that we want this to be an interactive session. And so Karen will be monitoring the chat. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat for Karen and I to ask our guests. And students here today, you might know that this panel kicks off our week of careers and social impact. So if you're not already planning it, I want to encourage you to attend the rest of the week's events, which I will post in the chat box. Tomorrow we'll be talking about immigration law. Wednesday night is our big virtual networking night, and we have lots of different guests coming for that. And Thursday, we are having a workshop on job and internship searching in the field. So make sure, I have to plug it, that you don't miss those events too. Now, today, our goal is to help everyone here get an inside look at understanding the variety of different ways they can pursue careers as change agents, and in particular within consulting. So I'm excited we have 3 alumni with us tonight, all doing very different kind of work from different types of roles. Unfortunately, one of our guests tonight, Regina Smedinghoff, is sick and unable to join us. But if you were interested in learning about her work in ESG and climate advisory, you can feel free to reach out to her, and I will put her email in the chat for everyone here to grab if they'd like to connect with Regina. So let's begin. I want to start by having each of our panelists introduce themselves to you and just provide like a brief overview, big picture view of your current role, where you work, and again, just big picture idea of what you do, and we'll get into some details from there. So I'm going to ask Shoshana to start, and then we can go Shoshana, Sophie, and April.
Thanks so much, Cheryl. Hi, everyone. And I really apologize that my camera's not working right now. It's one of those things where you use it all day, and at some point, I guess it decides to stop working. So you get to stick with this photo of me. I am Shoshana. I graduated from Tufts in 2007 and studied community health and American studies, and always knew that I wanted to make a positive impact in the world. And I didn't know exactly the path that would take. Initially, I thought maybe pre-med, and then I was like, no, that's Bio 101 is not for me. So I ended up focused on community health. And it's brought me on a really exciting career path over the past 15 years. Today, I'm an independent consultant, so I work on my own, and I usually work with about 3 organizations at a time. So right now, I am working first with an NGO in Guatemala, getting up and running their grants department to get grants funding and helping them professionalize their programming. The second client that I have right now is a social impact business in the UK. And with them, I mostly do knowledge management work. So what that means is this social impact business, it's a boutique consulting firm that's increasing gender equality in the private sector in emerging markets. So Latin America, Africa, Asia. And I write up and get out to the world what they are learning and achieving. So that's the second organization. And the third organization I'm working with right now is an impact consulting firm out of Paris. So this firm focuses on advising companies like Danone and Panera on how to create more social and environmental impact through their business models. So it's a really business-focused approach versus the first example, which is a very NGO-focused approach. And I work with them on designing their impact models. So really everything from project design to fundraising and communications. So that's me.
Great, Sophie.
Great, hi. My name is Sophie Lehrenbaum, and I graduated in 2018 I studied international relations and environmental science. And when I graduated, I knew I wanted to do something adjacent to the government. 2018 was a tough time to be interested in the government. I think depending on who based on the administration. And so I wanted to work in the government, but thought something government adjacent would be better. So I began working at Deloitte, which is one of the big four large professional services firms, which means they offer tax, audit, consulting, and risk and financial advisory services. So in the consulting practice, it's sort of like the traditional model that you think of. We help clients solve their most complex problems, it really from start to finish, but our clients in the GTS or government and public services practice really focus on an agency's mission rather than selling a product or service. So these missions can range from providing healthcare to veterans to ensuring airport security runs smoothly. And right now I'm primarily working in the customer strategy and applied design space, which means my team meets with agency leaders to provide strategic advising about ways that they can better serve their customers, the American people.
Thank you. Great. April?
Hi, everyone. I'm April Weintraub. I graduated with my bachelor's in 2020, and then I went straight into my master's and graduated in 2021. Right now, I'm a sustainability consultant for the Green Engineer. At the Green Engineer, we provide consulting expertise to architects and building owners that want to pursue certification for their buildings. So you might have heard of LEED or WELL or FitWell, which are all certifications that we work on. These certs work on quantifying a building's impact on the environment or on occupant health and wellness. While I was on campus, I went to the building 574 on Boston Ave, and they are a LEED building. You might have seen like the LEED plaque on the front door.
Great, thank you. All right, so I already have some follow-up questions, and maybe we can start with Shoshana. You will work as an independent consultant, so maybe you could tell us a little more about the path that led you here to this point in your career, where you are doing independent consulting, and what did it take to get here, and how was it that this, where you're at now, is what emerged after the past X years?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was definitely a path and an organic one, not something that I had ever thought about or planned to end up as an independent consultant, but it's where I've ended up and been really happy. So right out of Tufts, I was part of the Institute for Global Leadership and did EPIC my senior year. And through the IGL, I got linked up with the founder of an NGO in Mexico. And I'd always focused on Latin America, and I'd always been very interested in the NGO world and in Latin America. I'd had some internships in this space. So I got a job with this local NGO in Mexico, and didn't pay very much, but it was really interesting work. And I got to be in Mexico, and I got to really rise through the ranks very quickly. So in just 3-4 years, I went from very entry level to working directly with the senior leadership team of the organization, where they were turning to me saying, yeah, that's a great question. How do we fix it? And I said, I don't know how to fix this problem. You guys are 30 years my senior. Don't you know what to do? And they said, nope. I said, all right, I guess it's time to go to grad school. So at that point, I'd clear what I didn't know, what I needed to learn and wanted to learn to have an even greater impact. And I went back to the US for grad school. I say went because I'm sitting in Guatemala right now, so not in the US. And out of grad school, open a pathway to work at the largest USAID contractor, right? So USAID is the US government agency that does international development, although they don't actually do the work themselves, they contract it all out. And so you have quite a few big organizations sitting in Washington, DC that receive this money from USAID and then implement projects on the ground. And so I went to work for them for a while to really understand how the best, the leaders in the international development space and in the USAID contracting space were working. And so I learned, having really experienced first in Mexico what the reality was like on the ground in communities, implementing projects. Now I was on the other side of things, understanding what it's like in DC with the most institutionalized organizations doing also doing international development. And then that opened up a job for me at the Inter-American Development Bank, IDB. So if you haven't heard of that before, it's the World Bank, but for Latin America. And it's another one of the biggest funders in the region. So if you realize what just happened is I started at the very bottom of the food chain in terms of money flows, but really getting to understand how things worked in the nitty gritty. And then from there, I went up the financial food chain, the donation food chain, and worked with USAID money and then within one of the biggest funders. So all of this gave me a very wide perspective on programming and on fundraising. And with this, I returned to Mexico, and I had these contacts from DC and from the IDB, and I actually had an invitation to return to that original NGO, but I decided it would be best for everyone and for the sector if I built out my network in Mexico before I went back to that local NGO. So I started using my contacts from the IDB and connected to them and let them know, that I was now back in Mexico, and could I support them in any way? And there was some interest, but nothing really bit. So it was great that I had this work with the local NGO. And I was doing that at the same time while I was building up this network. And it really was a slow cook while I was working for the local NGO and some other clients. And with time, that network I had and the networking I was doing started to bubble up. And I ended up doing a number of independent consulting projects and really enjoying it. In fact, I enjoyed it so much that I decided to leave the part-time work I was doing within organizations and be fully focused on independent consulting and thus not have to manage people, which I had gotten tired of, and thus not having to deal with internal politics, which I had also gotten tired of. So that's my path, all things possible because of the work I did within organizations, really hands-on, on the ground. People knew that they could trust me. They knew what I was talking about. And then they were interested in bringing me on to really bridge the gaps between the local reality and the funder reality. That's me.
That's great, Shoshana. Thank you. And it sounds like networking played a really big role in that transition to full independent consultant. I have a feeling that's going to come up again. But before, I want to ask Sophie if you can tell us a little bit about joining the public services practices at Deloitte, especially as a young alumni who's just starting out. What is it like to start out at a big firm?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, so Deloitte is a firm of hundreds of thousands of people. It's huge, and you can really feel the size sometimes. But I was lucky enough to start with a pretty big cohort, and that's pretty much the case with a lot of campus hires. You'll begin with a large group of peers, and they'll send you to do several weeks of training. They'll send you to Deloitte University for at least a week, where you'll just have a day-long training sessions to get you up to speed on some of the tips and tricks of the trade, which can range from things like Excel and PowerPoint to actually like presentation skills. So I think that was a good buffer time to have. It really helped me build my skill set, which was great. And I just found that periodically there were a lot of investment opportunities for a younger practitioner. There was a lot of built-in mentorship and a lot of other initiatives and networking events, to kind of help you get your feet wet in different issue areas you're interested in, but you might not necessarily have been working on in your first project. And I found that to be really invaluable for me in terms of getting experience and building my toolkit early on.
Awesome. And April, our engineer, I'm switching the camera. So April, I know you said that as an engineering student at Tufts, you were always, or you weren't always sure where there was space for social impact when you were, doing your undergraduate degree. What were some of the things that you did to start exploring where and how you could use your technical skills to make a difference? And I think a lot of students here, regardless of major, can kind of relate to that as like, how do I start even thinking about taking what I am doing right now and infusing some helpfulness and meaningful experiences in there?
Yeah, it was difficult. I imagine, it's still difficult to answer that question as a student at Tufts. As background, I got my bachelor's and master's at Tufts in civil engineering. And while I was at Tufts, I made significant effort, maybe not even like knowingly, to spread myself out and really seek civil engineering adjacent opportunities. Initially, I went into civil engineering because I thought to myself, this is an engineering discipline that designs key infrastructure that we rely on every day to drink water, to ride the train, etc. But as I progressed in my classes and heard about the industry, I realized that you don't get to choose what projects you work on at a typical engineering firm. One day you're working on a gigantic Amazon warehouse, and the next day it could be a high school. But I didn't feel like this constant building was for me without considering the impacts on the environment. So at school, I audited an urban planning class that focused on sustainable communities. I focused my engineering management group project on insulating windows. I was also a part of Tufts Food Rescue. I tried to really widen my net into sustainability focused activities. Then when I had my first few internships, I worked as a sustainability intern for the city of Cambridge. At an engineering firm, I helped start their sustainability committee. And I did a project on electrifying their vehicle fleet. So I really just expressed my interest wherever I was and worked hard to find places to make an impact within my time at Tufts.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I think probably everyone just heard something that they could do to start exploring the intersections. I love that you mentioned auditing a class. I don't know, was that something someone recommended to you? Because it's something I often forget to encourage students to do. I
mean, as an engineering student, it can be hard to make classes work, or I need to focus on major classes. But I always, looked through the class catalog, oh, that's interesting. Maybe I don't have the time to, get an A in this class to do all of these assignments, but I'm really interested in it. You email the professor and say, hey, can I audit this? Do you mind if there's one extra person in the room? And usually they're like, sure.
It's really as easy as that, right? You just have to
really
just have to get the idea and be brave enough to ask to try a thing, right? Great. So I want to go back to Shoshana now that we've talked about, some different intersections and what, kind of different experiences as consultants can look like. Shoshana, I wonder if you can tell us a little more about what goes into being an independent consultant, on your business side. You talked about how you got there, but what's it like now as you're doing it? So to speak.
Yeah, sure. So I should caveat this by saying It can probably look a million different ways, and I'll share what it looks like for me. Because at the end of the day, the beauty of being an independent consultant is you take on the projects you want and the types of projects you want. So I certainly know some independent consultants who do like very deep dive. I take on one client at a time for 3 months, and I do a deep research project and design their project, and etc. And that's not how I do it. And I also know other people who say, okay, I'll take on 5 clients and I'll be your project manager in an ongoing way, sort of balancing all the pieces. And that's not how I do it either, because that sounds kind of crazy making to me to have all those balls in the air. So the way that I've taken it on is sort of between those two, where I come in as an advisor, as a consultant, as someone who can support organizations in structuring their everything they're doing. But at the end of the day, it's on them. It's on them to move their projects forward, and it's on them to really sail the ship. So what do I offer as an independent consultant? I would say that I bring 3 things to my clients. The first is knowledge. The second is experience. And the third is contacts. So they usually hire me because I have key skills that they need, together with key knowledge and funder or partner contacts from previous roles that I've had. So as I mentioned, I worked with the IDB, and almost every nonprofit in Latin America wants money from the IDB. So they say, okay, you know some people there, but more than that, you know what a good project proposal to the IDB looks like, and you know what departments of the IDB are going to be interested. And so you can help guide us through, okay, this is a specific project that we're going to submit because it's going to be the most interesting to the IDB. And this is the department of the IDB we're going to submit it to. And then you're going to, I work with them to develop out that proposal until it looks really good. And I feel confident that the IDB could be interested in what they're going to submit. So I have to say that I'm a bit of an oddball in the space. Sometimes people don't know what to do with me, and that's okay. It means that when I'm the right fit for them, it's exactly what they need. But it also means that opportunities don't come every single day. It's a slow cook, and it's about being on the radar of different organizations so that when they need what I offer, they think of me. And then once we work together, they see the quality of my work and they see the results we get together, and then they're pretty hooked and they keep coming back and we keep working together. So this Guatemalan NGO, I've worked with them for almost 3 years now, and that's a result of being the right fit for the right organization and having really good results. So I can tell you, Cheryl, I don't know if you want me to stop there or tell you about a meaningful project that I had recently.
Ooh, let's pause. I want to ask a few more questions, and then we're going to get back to the day-to-day stuff.
Great.
Yeah, I switched up the order a little bit when we lost one of our alumni here to being sick. It was so helpful, Shoshana, how you just laid out, the 3 things you have to offer. I'm sure that didn't all just come to you like that. It was a process. And just like how your work comes to you, I think for students who are thinking or seeing themselves in the future as an independent consultant, it's so helpful the way you just broke down how it all works, how it happens. Now, Sophie, I'm sure that it works a little bit different at a big firm like Deloitte. And I'm curious, maybe you can talk about how your particular role is positioned at Deloitte and some of those main differences in like how the process all works from what Shoshana just shared.
Sure, yeah. So I think Shoshana alluded to, a lot of the challenges of being an independent consultant, which she is spending for herself and bringing in her own work, which is so impressive. And I think on our end, we definitely will help with proposals that the government will put out proposals that we'll bid on, and other contracting agencies will bid on them as well. And if we win, then a staffing process will begin. So for the average analyst or consultant coming in, you're not going to be like going out and completing these bids, but you will rather be really focusing on your network. I feel like your next role at Deloitte is very network based. So it's really who do you know within the firm, and they place a great emphasis in like coffee chats and just meeting with people on your team. And oftentimes, if you advertise yourself as having a specific skill set or interest, then folks will start coming to you saying, hey, I have such and such role that you might be interested in, or this is in your specific area of expertise. But your initial role is something that you're staffed on kind of automatically. And then from there, you find your next position usually.
So you kind of like get assigned different projects and then build yourself from there.
Yeah, and I think the projects can, government consulting is really interesting because our contracts are typically longer. So when you think of commercial consulting, I at least think of like 6-week sprint projects where you are working for one company, long hours, you're flying out there, and then you move to another company 6 weeks later and you're doing kind of rinsing and repeating. Whereas our contracts tend to be, I've had 2 months on contracts and I've had 5-year-long contracts that I've been on. They can go on for a really long time. So you can have some pretty stable work there, or you can switch around too, which is kind of nice. It's good freedom that it allows you to have.
Yeah, so some really different like structures for this work to be doing that we're talking about here, which is great. And now, April, I know that you started at Guidehouse and now you're at something a little bit more specialized, the Green Engineer. Were there some advantages for you of starting your career at an organization like Guidehouse, and what did you learn there that you took with you, pro and con?
Yeah, great question. Guidehouse is a little bit smaller than Deloitte, but it's still a gigantic company. And going into it, especially from Tufts, it felt so huge. Like Sophie alluded to, there are so many different places to work within the company. I actually interviewed for one team, and then they were able to say, like, you'd be an awesome employee, but let's find another team that fits even better with your background. And while I was there, I always felt that expectations were pretty high for employees, but there were lots of opportunities for promotions and for high pay. That being said, it was hard for me personally to find like good standing in company culture or like a sense of belonging. But it definitely was an awesome place to start within the consulting world. I got to work on a large variety of projects, meet a lot of important people, and it set me up well to figure out what I wanted to do next, and develop common consulting skills I could use anywhere. Now at the Green Engineer, I work on projects that, like you alluded to, are much more niche, and I've become much more specialized in my own skills. But I get to be a part of a pretty awesome company that has great office culture and like aligns more with my personal values.
That's great. I love how you talked about sort of pros and cons and fit, and how it sounds like you found out, or you discovered quickly sort of where you wanted to go next. And that's just as important as finding your first job after graduation and staying for a long time because it's a great fit in exactly what you thought you wanted. Yeah. So let's get into the day-to-day, because I think that's what is on a lot of students' minds is like, what do you actually do? Right? So Shoshana, maybe we can start with you. And I know there's no typical day, but maybe you can share with us like a meaningful project that you worked on recently, or something you're working through with a client now.
Yeah, absolutely. So last year, with this Paris-based organization, I supported a cafe. It's an American company across the country that has a franchise model. And in the midst of the Black Lives Matter protest a couple of years back, this cafe franchise company had recognized that they needed to step up and they needed to be more active on who were their franchisees and how was diversity being supported, not only at the sort of the front, the workers who are preparing your sandwiches, for example, but all the way up to who was owning the franchises. So they got to thinking, and actually the CEO put a call out to all of the departments and said, what can you do to support intergenerational wealth in the United States through your business unit, through your department? And the HR department realized that the franchising requirements they had made it inaccessible for the BIPOC community and for women to be franchisees. Like, it was just so much money that you had to put down on the table at the very beginning because of the way that this company was structuring its franchises, that it wasn't accessible to anyone other than old white men, essentially. So they said, all right, we are going to make our franchise, like, we're going to make it accessible for the BIPOC community and for women to become franchisees. So they had this idea, this spark of an idea, and that's all they had. They said, we don't know how to make it a reality. So they came to us, and I got pulled in on this project, and I worked with them over the course of 2022 to think through, okay, so this is your vision. As a company, this is your vision is intergenerational wealth for the BIPOC community. But what is that? What do those individuals want, right? Like, so guiding them through from the very basics of, go talk to your target participant, have some focus groups, have some interviews, find out what they're interested in. And once you understand that, then we can design a business model that is still profitable for you and has this social impact that you're aiming for. And so taking them through designing the business model, designing the social impact model, designing their storytelling, designing the indicators, the metrics, the evaluation they were going to use to be able to really identify if they were achieving their goals, identifying what their financing model was going to be, and then who the financing partners could be, so that it wouldn't all fall on the shoulders of this one company, but there might be other, like maybe the bank that does a lot of the financing for this company nationally also is interested in supporting the BIPOC community. And so inviting them in to be financial partners in this project. And I remember it was the end, so it was about 3 months into the project when they came to me and they said, we just gave an update to our CEO and he thinks this is just like, we should stop investing our time in it. It's just going to be too risky and too expensive. And we should just do something a lot more accessible, a lot easier. And I said, okay. And what's that easy option? They're like, oh, we just changed this one rule. And I was like, great, do you need my help on that? They're like, no, we can just do that. And I said, okay, why don't you go do that? And we'll continue to work together for the rest of the year as planned. And we'll design this model. And then you can go present it back to the CEO. And once he sees something tangible, that's not risky, that has a lot of potential impact, he might be convinced. And so that's what we did. And at the end of November, they presented again to their CEO. And he said, I love it. And not only do I love it, but I want this happening next year. Not in 2 years, not in 5 years. I want this to be piloted next year. And so that was an incredible experience to go from a company that had a spark of an idea to a company that had a viable business and social impact model and a company leadership that was convinced and that was backing the project. So that's one of the most exciting ones from last year.
Wow, that's really awesome. And what a great story to tell. I particularly am interested in what I think you skipped over, where there was leadership that maybe wanted to take a different route, but you were able to sort of push a little bit, and that might not be the right word to use, to actually be able to show them and have them embrace and ultimately have a larger impact. So I think that's pretty
Yeah,
sensible.
giving the team the tools so that they had a viable option to present to their CEO. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So Sophie, tell us a little bit about what your work can look like. Again, knowing it's all over the map and you do a lot of different kinds of things. What is something, a project or something you worked on recently that you could share with us to give us a sense of what it day-to-day looks like?
Sure, yeah, and that's true. Consulting looks like so many different things, and I am often told it's a very nebulous term because it is. But I'll give two examples of projects I've been on recently. So the project I'm currently on is providing customer experience strategy support for the Social Security Administration. So that is really conducting customer research and data analysis to identify just the major customer pain points for people who are going through the retirement and disability application processes. So we are meeting with customers every day. So people going in and filing for disability, talking to them about their pain points. We are meeting with social workers who help them through the process. We're meeting with disability lawyers who support them in hearings, et cetera. And then we're doing desk research simultaneously. And then we're conducting like several data-driven studies as well. And we're doing all of this to map the end-to-end customer process, customer journey. And we are trying to figure out where the greatest inequities lie in the process. So where is for whom and where is access really difficult, and how can we mitigate their pain? So that's been a really cool project that I've enjoyed working on a lot. And I'd say the other big project that I worked on was actually for, or another one of my favorite projects was for the National Federation of the Blind. That was more of a strategy and analytics project where we developed, distributed, and analyzed 100,000 surveys basically on behalf of the Federation. And we used Qualtrics, Excel, Survey Gizmo to basically understand how we could keep the Federation for the Blind financially viable in the next 20 years, and how we can sustain membership growth for the next 20 years as well. And that was a very cool project because it was run entirely by junior practitioners. So we had one partner at the senior level, and then there was 4 of us. And literally, my phone number was the one given out to provide survey support. So people from all over the country were calling me like my screen reader isn't working. Can you tell me how to complete the survey? And it was really wild, but it was great to actually get my hands dirty and really be involved in the nitty gritty of creating this plan for an organization and telling them this is what you need to do in order to be successful and to reach, expand your client base, provide the service that you're seeking to provide, and make sure that you can continue to do that in the coming years. So that was my favorite project I've been on.
I love the variety of stories that we're hearing and work that everyone does so far. In April, we're going to get to you next, but students in the room, you might start picking up on some of the skills that continue to be mentioned and how some of the different work is categorized, right? Sophie mentions like strategy and different kinds of ways you might work with the organization that you're working with. April, our green engineer, what does a day look like for you, or what kind of projects do you get to work on?
Yeah, so at the green engineer, in most basic terms, I spend most of my time coordinating meetings and looking at architectural drawings and providing information for clients. So the green engineer kind of works as a middle ground to the client, which is usually an architect, and the certification body for whatever certification we're working on. And we try to find the best pathway for a certain building or project to get certified. So we kind of serve as experts because we've done so many projects. We know so much about the ins and outs of each certification system. that we can get an architect's building towards certification faster than, if they had to learn all of the information themselves. And that's sort of the core of consulting. And I think Sophie and Shoshana mentioned this as well. Like, we act as an expert to help a client get to wherever they want to be. So as an example of a project, I've recently worked on some university buildings, which I feel like is applicable today. One in particular is a combination dorm and dining hall building at UConn, which is a lot like CARM. We have meetings with the architect and with representatives from UConn, and we discuss different sustainability measures that could be used to earn LEED certification. So these questions can be, how much daylight is going into each room? What type of HVAC equipment are you installing? How much green space are you surrounding the building with? What material will the roof be? Will it reflect or absorb light? We then, encourage them really nicely to make the sustainable choice for their design. Sometimes it's not so nice. Sometimes it's like you're choosing between a silver and a gold certification. If you do this one thing, that's the easiest path towards gold. We really strongly suggest that you do it to meet, whatever goal you want to make. We help document these decisions and then submit it to the certifying body for review. So we don't do the review, but we gather all of the information the architect wants to show off to earn certain credits throughout the certification system. We package it up all nice, give it to the certifying body, and then they review it. We also, coordinate so many different team members. It's not just architect and building owner. It's architect and plumber and builder and civil engineer and HVAC engineer, energy modeler. It's a lot of coordinating a lot of different people all towards a common goal. And I think that's pretty common across all consulting. It was true at Guidehouse before, and I'm sure Sophie and Shoshana also agree. A lot of consulting is getting a bunch of people in a room all working towards a common goal.
Great. Yeah, it's so great to hear all of the similarities in the process in which you all work, but the differences in the kinds of projects you're doing and what you're each technically doing each day as well. Are there any, and I'm going to just throw this one out there, if anyone has an idea or something to share it. Are there any trends in the industry that you're starting to notice? Maybe just some kind of problem that clients are having that keeps coming up, or you're seeing a shift towards organizations you're working with thinking in a particular way. I'll just leave this open to anyone who wants to answer. Shoshana, you just unmuted, so we'll go with you first.
Sure. I would say in the NGO funding world, the trends are project sustainability and project scaling. It's all about how are you going to fund this work after our money ends, and how are you going to reach more and more people in the future, which I'll let you just take those concepts and do some research. And there's a lot of polemic around them, around what should be expected in terms of sustainability. And in this world of focusing on local and community led, what does scaling mean? So that's on the funder, NGO funder side. And then on the corporate sustainability side, I'd say metrics. There's more and more concern about, okay, how are you going to evaluate this? You have a great statement, but we don't want greenwashing. We don't want pinkwashing. How are you going to evaluate it and measure it and prove it? So metrics would be on the corporate sustainability side.
Yeah, great. Anything else to add?
I can go if Sophie's not going to jump in. I think in, my little world of sustainability, I think architects and building owners are starting to build their base of knowledge about green building more and more. Part of the Green Engineers mission is to educate. And I feel like team members are coming to the table with a higher base of understanding than they once might have. We've also been really busy. The state of Massachusetts and new code requirements have made green building more of a necessity, to get a building permit. So we get more and more work coming in the door. Two trends I've seen specifically in my work, both at Guidehouse and the Green Engineer, and is quite in line with Shoshana, what she also said. One is resiliency. As climate changes, the world around us, we are seeing engineers and architects really concerned, especially, cities and planning and zoning ordinances about resiliency. So an example is in the Boston Seaport, all generators and like HVAC systems have to be placed higher up in the building to prevent future damage from flooding and sea level rise. And then the second one is incorporating the voices of the underrepresented in the building process. This, wasn't really considered before the Black Lives Matter protests and movement. And now architects, engineers, city planners are really having those conversations and bringing it to the forefront. Equity and discussions on what impacts a building will have to its surrounding community is also being discussed more and more. LEED as a rating system is starting to include credits about social equity and diversity in project teams. So I think I'm seeing some pretty positive trends, at least within my world of sustainability.
I agree. And go for it.
I was just going to say, you can see me. I've been nodding along to everything Shoshana and April have said. Deloitte recently just kicked off our sustainability, climate, and equity practice because it is a big priority for the company to start getting that space, because you're seeing that in all of the bids that we are getting. It's pretty big. And then just a couple other trends to quickly touch on. They are constantly hammering home the importance of being tech savvy, even if you're not a tech consultant. That's something I've been hearing a lot. So we have a big cloud community of practice, and also AI is of course a really hot topic as well. So I'll just leave it at that in the interest of time. But
yeah, perfect. So we got a couple questions in the chat over the past hour that are similar to something I wanted to ask the three of you as well. So want to ask a work-life balance question, because this is what students are asking about. And not surprising, because there tends to be a narrative sometimes on campus about what it's like to be a consultant, and some perceived benefits like traveling, high earning potential, complex problem solving, sometimes coming at a cost. And I'm curious if any of you have something to share about how you define for yourself work-life balance, and what is your regular practice of taking care of yourself amidst a potential, lots of movement or change in your work. What does that look like?
I can jump in. I want to preface with, I think it's really, really dependent on what company you work for. So I can compare and contrast Guidehouse with the Green Engineer. At Guidehouse, I got to travel to Washington, D.C. pretty frequently. I earned a good amount and I had a huge impact, but I was expected to work as many hours as it took to get a project done. I had to be online to answer a question at almost any time during the day. But at my current position at the Green Engineer, no one is expected to work over a 40-hour week. On the flip side, I don't really travel now. I earn less than I once did, and my impact is much smaller and localized. But I have a really flexible schedule and a super understanding boss that gets it, that life happens sometimes, that keeps you from work. Most recently, our dog got skunked, and I had to just randomly take a morning off to try to bathe her 10 times to get the skunk smell off, when maybe at Guidehouse that wouldn't have been a possibility, and I would have had to rely on my partner to take care of the dog because I would have to work and be online at that time no matter what. So personally, right now, I'm feeling pretty lucky when it comes to work-life balance, but it's so dependent on the company you're in, the boss that you have, and the team and the workload that you're in right now. And it can vary throughout the year too.
I can go next.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would say it definitely varies organization by organization. I can't speak about being within a consulting firm because I've never done that. But what I can say is that working in the corporate world, when I was working at Dannon, I definitely had the most perks were at the IDB and at Dannon. The least perks were at the local NGO. And I think that's pretty sort of expected. The best pay was IDB and Dannon as well. But the thing that made my heart sing and soar the most was working with the local NGO. So you have to balance for yourself what you prefer. And I think that the working hours were pretty similar across all of them. It had more to do with the leadership and how they valued work-life balance and how they translated it down to the organization. Because in NGOs, even though you're paid very little, there's an expectation that it's a commitment, it's a cause, it's your heart. So you're going to work a lot anyways, even if you're not paid a lot. What I can say is that today I work closer to 35 hours a week. And while I don't earn what I used to, I choose every project for myself. I choose what days, what hours I work. I take off when I want. I live wherever I want. So there's like maximum flexibility. Right now I live next to a beautiful lake overlooking incredible volcanoes. And I have time to go hiking. So it's all about deciding what makes you happy and at what point in your life you want each thing. I was so happy to have earned a lot early on. It allowed me to then take off a bunch of time, an entire year, and go backpacking through the world. And now I have something that's a little more balanced. So I think no one option is where you're going to be forever if you don't want to be there forever. So decide what you want in this moment. What's your priority in this moment? And then tomorrow or next year, you can make a different decision.
Sophie, is there anything that you want to add? So far, such great insights and advice.
Yeah, I think, well, that hiking every day, that sounds great. But yeah, so I'd say that your typical work day and work-life balance will really depend on your project at Deloitte. As it was alluded to, there's more rigidity when you work for a big company like that, and we have performance metrics that we have to hit, and we have a certain number of client billable hours that we have to hit. So it's almost like in a law firm that you have to bill a certain number of hours. I think we have to bill something like 1,900 hours a year. So that said, I think that the GPS side, and the reason why so many people prefer GPS to commercial is because there is an expectation that you are online when all of your clients are online, which is more often 9 to 5. So there is an expectation that we complete all of our work by a specific amount of time, and that we're billing our clients a certain amount of hours. But I think it's not as bad as I thought it would be. And I will say that I've just found it to be really critical in an environment like that, to learn how to set boundaries as best as you can, especially because when you work from home, you are always at your laptop. It's just at your fingertips, and home is your office. So, and that's primarily what I've been doing. So that can be as easy as communicating up, like I will not be online and checking my emails until 9 tomorrow, or yeah. So it really will depend on the project though. And the travel perks, I think, have definitely, I think that the commercial side, you definitely see a lot more of those. But again, I've been able to travel for my role. I've gone to Orlando and to Dallas a few times, and I'll be going to Alabama next month. So there are definitely opportunities there for that, but that's typically more of something that I've seen on the commercial side.
Great. Wow, I wouldn't have even thought of all of those insights and pieces of advice from the three of you on that topic. So thank you, so valuable. And because it's 7, I want to be so mindful of everyone's time. If our panelists can stay and answer one speed round question, I would love to ask you each, if you were to close this, if you were each to hire an intern or a recent grad for a job with you, what is the number one skill, trait, quality, experience, whatever it is that you would be looking for in that student?
I can go first because I'm unmuted already. But and I don't know if this is the most helpful answer, the answer that you'll want to hear, because I'm not sure that there's not a class you can take on this. But I think this, like, soft skills are so critical. And I would 9 times out of 10, I would say, and I'm sure my colleagues would say, someone who is easy to work with, who's just pleasant and is willing to put in the effort and be a team player. I'd rather have them on my team than the person who knows everything. I think a lot of these firms expect, at least the big firms, expect you to come in without like a very specialized skill set, unless you're really hired for something incredibly specialized. So you can train skills, you cannot train attitude.
Great.
I'm going to pick up on what Sophie said. I love that. So I would say someone who's happy to pick things up that they haven't done before, figure out how to get it done, and then they're open to feedback.
All great answers that I definitely agree with. I actually talked with my manager about this question, and we both agreed that, at least for the green engineer, it's all about interest. Interest in the company and the work that they do, real examples of incorporating that work into school projects, professional certifications, clubs that you participate in, and then, like, interest in the company, that you did your homework and then can explain not only what they do, but like why you truly think you would enjoy working there. Like, show your interest, talk about your interest. Like they both alluded, it doesn't have to be technical information, but that you're willing to, do the work and show what you truly want to do.
Wonderful. That's exactly what we want to hear. So thank you so much, April, Shoshana, and Sophie, for joining us tonight. This has been great. You have provided so many insights, and probably spurred a lot more questions for some students here. So no pressure, if you are willing to have students reach out to you for future conversations, I'll invite you to put your email or contact in the chat. No pressure. I know, Shoshana, I'm going to just call you out because, Shoshana, you are listed in the herd as a volunteer, someone whose students can reach out to talk to and ask questions. So you can always find her there if you want to hear more about the great work that she's doing. And with that, Karen and I will just wrap up. Again, thank you so much for being here, April, Shoshana, and Sophie, for sharing your, what day is it? Monday evening with us, an hour of your Monday evening with us. And again, it's just been great hearing your insights and advice for students interested in this type of work. So we can't thank you enough, and have a great evening. And students here, thank you so much for your participation, your attendance, and your thoughtfulness in asking questions.